I wanted to kick us off today with just an opening question of just how everyone has been celebrating Earth Day today. You can, as I said, either share your answers in the chat box, and our community engagement coordinator, Siboney, will read those out for you, or you can raise your hand and Siboney will call on you to unmute yourself. So I will kick us off with sharing how I've been celebrating Earth Day today, or I'm going to. I will be definitely heading outside after this conversation to go for a long walk. I've really been enjoying just being able to observe more of the nature in my own neighborhood and own backyard in this really unusual time. So Siboney, I'll turn it over to you to share the rest of the answers as they come in.
Okay, I'm going to give it a moment.
I've got one. This is Shannon.
Go for it.
All right, awesome. Not Shannon Binns, to be clear. Shannon Reynolds here. I'm calling in from Philadelphia, so excited to be on the call, excited to hear how everyone's celebrating. I'll tell you, I started my Earth Day celebration by donating to Sustain Charlotte, so making a pledge. And like, if anyone else on the call hasn't, I'm sure you all have already, but if you haven't, like, that would be a cool thing to finish out Earth Day. Also, I signed up for a CSA today, so that was a really cool and fun way to celebrate. So that's what I've been doing.
Great, thanks, Shannon. It's a great kickoff.
Sharing that, yes. And some responses we've had in the chat are long walks, short run, now going outside, doing meetings outside, working outside throughout the day, watering my garden, and planting new trees a few weeks ago from Jeremy. That's awesome. And I see a lot of walking and active living, so that's really wonderful. And picking up trash in the neighborhood from Erin. Awesome.
Great. Well, thanks y'all for sharing. We've been asking people on social media to share. We created a list of 10 ways people can live sustainably throughout this period of social distancing. And we've been asking people to share those on social media with the hashtag #ISustainCLT. So if you do take a photo of anything you do later today, we would love to see that on social media. It's definitely lots of long walks, lots of gardening, lots of planting, lots of flowers. So it's great to hear that everyone is getting outside and celebrating the earth today. Great, well, thanks for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Binns. I'm sure most of you guys, if you've been around the organization for a while, have met Shannon or heard his name. He is our executive director and founder. As I mentioned, we're also celebrating Sustain Charlotte's 10th anniversary this month and really all this year. And Shannon has obviously been at the helm of that for the past 10 years. So Shannon, I will turn it over to you.
Right, thanks, Sarah Ann. Everybody hear me okay? I think I'm off mute. Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much for taking the time on this very special and very beautiful 50th Earth Day to connect with us and with one another. I think at this time, for many of us, the desire for connection with others, especially people who share your values, is unusually high. And we just wanted to provide you an opportunity to not let this 50th anniversary of Earth Day pass you by without a chance to celebrate with others in our community. Now, having said that, for those of you who are introverts like my wife, you've probably been quite happy to not be connecting so much with other people right now. And you may even be hesitant about being on this call. I've loved some of the memes about introverts during the shutdown. My wife and I have got some good laughs out of those. In fact, those of you who have your video muted as well are probably introverts, and that's perfectly fine. So thanks especially to you introverts for joining us tonight. And we will make this hopefully as fun as possible. I loved hearing what you've been doing today to celebrate. And for those of you who maybe are just now celebrating Earth Day for the first time because you've been working hard all day, I think we should make this official by raising our glasses together. I don't know if you have a glass nearby or a drink, a beverage of your choice. I've got some water, but I thought maybe, we could make this, a toast. We could raise our glasses in a toast. And if you don't have one, all right, Ron, you got a glass of wine there, I see. Looks like most of you have something. You got some kombucha. Great. It looks like most of you have glasses. The rest of you just play along with us and pretend. So a toast to you for being part of a global community today of 1 billion people all over the world who are not just conscious of their impact on the planet, but also working to ensure a safe, healthy, livable planet for those who come after us. So a toast to you and a toast to 50th anniversary of Earth Day. I feel like I need something else to make a noise here. And this will hopefully be my first and last virtual toast, because it's not near as exciting as doing it in person. But anyway, I'm sure many of you know the origin of that first Earth Day in 1970, in April of 1970. But for those of you who don't, I think it's worth noting that that Earth Day was a response to a growing human health crisis. And it really wasn't about saving the polar bears or saving the trees or really even the earth. It wasn't about saving the earth. It was about saving people whose health had become threatened by pollution. And I think that's something that's, it's very much the focus of our world right now, given the COVID pandemic. So I thought it was worth reflecting on that. I'm sure you've already reflected on that, but I would be amiss if I didn't mention that. And, I think that really that connection between our health and the health of the planet's often overlooked. I can't tell you how many times people, when they hear about, what we do, or they just even hear the name, they so quickly divorce sustainability and environmental concern from people. And so one thing we really try to do is focus on how what we're doing ultimately is about preserving a high quality of life for people. Both people alive today and people in the future. So I just think there's a lot of overlap between what we're celebrating today and what we're all concerned about in the larger pandemic that we're part of, that we're facing. So on that note, I really hope that this coming together that we are experiencing, which is such an incredible thing to experience in our lifetimes, to fight a human health threat, is something we will remember and can continue to fight the other threats to human health that we are reminded of on days like this, on Earth Day. So I want to turn just for a moment, now to talk just a little bit about Sustain Charlotte, because as Sarah Ann mentioned, and I think you all know, in addition to celebrating Earth Day today, we're also celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, but today was actually the 10-year anniversary of our very first event, which was a visioning workshop held at CPCC, where we asked attendees to create together a 20-year vision for our region, looking through the lens of sustainability across a whole range of issues that really comprise a community's sustainability. So it was 2010, April 22nd of 2010. And we asked people, what would Charlotte look like in the year 2030 with respect to, transportation and energy and water and our economy and so forth, and our built environment. And that really became the blueprint for a lot of the work that we've been doing over these last 10 years and the things that we've been advocating for. And the reason that was our first event, reason I felt it was important that we have that event was because at that time, in mid-late 2009, when I decided to hold that event, and really the event itself the decision to hold a visioning event actually led to my decision to create an organization. It's kind of funny. I didn't set out to create an organization. I just felt Charlotte lacked a sustainable vision for how the city would grow. But I realized that if I was going to hold an event, I had to have a place where people could register and learn about the event. So I had to create a web page for people to do that. And I felt like to have a web page, I needed a name of the organization and I needed a logo. So it was really that first event that we're celebrating, which was the catalyst for Sustain Charlotte and for the vision that we have been working towards these last 10 years. And I think for me, I felt it was important to have that vision because at that time, for those of you who weren't in Charlotte, or maybe you were but don't remember, sustainable growth in our city was not something very many people talked about. In fact, I had just moved to Charlotte a couple of years before 2010 and was always running into people who seemed to be complaining about the way in which Charlotte was growing. And it just struck me that if all of these people were to come together and speak with one voice, we could change the way Charlotte was growing. And that was, really the sort of the genesis or the idea behind Sustain Charlotte. For me personally, it was learning as a newcomer to Charlotte about the tremendous loss of trees, which are the natural element here that Charlotteans have that many cities don't have, and that we hold dear. We don't have an ocean or a lake or a river, running through our city that we can enjoy. It's our trees, and so learning about the loss of trees, realizing the dependency that almost everyone here had on cars, and seeing that it was our urban sprawl and our growth pattern that was leading to those problems, were what personally, motivated me to found this organization. So that's a little bit about how we got started. For those of you who didn't know that story, and I think, over these past 10 years, as I said, we've really just been focused on creating, working towards that vision that really came to the front, or to the fore in 2010, and has been a sort of a guidepost for us. And I think, I'm personally thrilled that sustainability is talked about much more today in Charlotte than it was 10 years ago. In fact, the city even has an office of sustainability, which didn't exist 10 years ago. And we've made progress, as those of you who have been here know. In fact, each month this year, we will be publishing an article about the progress we've made towards that 2030 vision that we cast 10 years ago, and the work that remains to be done. So be on the lookout for that. I know that Meg, our program director, has been working hard on our first article, which is going to be talking about the progress we've made here in the Charlotte region on air quality. So that's coming out probably in the next week or two. Now, I don't want to dominate this party, and it wouldn't really be a party if one person is just talking the whole time. So I want to give you plenty of time to ask questions, of me or others about Sustain Charlotte, about sustainability locally or globally, things that are on your mind. And I also just want to say thank you to all of you who have donated to us, volunteered at an event over these last 10 years, attended an event, emailed your elected official when we asked you to, told someone about us, or supported us in some way I haven't mentioned over these past 10 years, because we would absolutely not be celebrating 10 years this year without people like you. So really appreciate all of you. And I also want to recognize our board members who are on the call with us today. Before I started talking, I looked at the list, and I know Sean Heath was on. I think Sean is on, if you want to give a wave, Sean. Betty Chafin-Rash, I saw, was on. Our board chair, Ron Tober, is with us. I think I saw our board member, Sarah Fedina. Richard Cuevas, I believe, is on the call. Lisa Richards, our past board chair. And is there any other board members that have joined since I started speaking that I missed here? I'll take a look at the list. Has gotten long enough now that it's hard for me to scan. But if there's anybody else that I missed, feel free to shout out, or I'll keep, if I see someone else that I missed. Of course, we have all of our staff on today as well, and they've been working hard to pull this event together today, and all the other things we've been doing remotely over these past several weeks. So thanks to them. So on that note, I will stop and see what questions you all have. Sarah Ann can call on you if you want to raise your hand, or you can send a message and a question in the chat, and she'll read that out loud as well.
Ron, it sounded like you had a question you're about to ask.
Well, it's actually, I just wanted to extend my congratulations and compliments to Shannon for having visioned and created, this organization. I think it's a tremendous effort, a tremendous job, and I think he deserves yeoman's credit for what he has been able to accomplish and what it will mean to this community in the years ahead. So, congratulations, Shannon, on 10 years. And my compliments for what you've been able to do. And also extend our compliments to your wife, too, because I'm sure that she's part of your being able to spend the time on this as well. So,
No doubt.
congratulations.
No doubt. Thank you. Thanks for saying that, Ron. Yeah, my wife is really the brains behind the operation. So I'll pass that on to her.
All right, we've got another question from Jeremy in the chat box. He says, are there similar organizations surrounding Charlotte that are similar to Sustain Charlotte?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I didn't mention in my attempt to be short is I was actually inspired by an organization called Sustainable Atlanta, which unfortunately, despite the name, no longer exists. But I had met the deputy director of Sustainable Atlanta in a leadership program actually in 2008 or 2009, and really liked what they were doing to bring people together, across sectors, across disciplines, to advance sustainability in Atlanta. And then the more I looked into that organization, I realized almost every major city in the U.S. had an organization like this. Most of them are called Sustainable, insert name of city, Sustainable St. Louis, Sustainable Seattle. And we just didn't have one yet in Charlotte, at least not with that name. So that is what inspired it. So, I haven't done that research recently to know, if other organizations like this are as widespread, but certainly there are organizations that don't have that particular name who are working to advance sustainability in their communities at the local level, by the hundreds. So I think what we're doing is not by any means unique, but certainly we're one of the organizations in Charlotte working on this.
Awesome. Nicole has a question. She says, is there a junior organization specific to teens or high schoolers that is connected to this organization?
Well, there is, one thing that's been really exciting over the past year or two is really been the rise in youth advocacy around climate change with the Sunrise Movement. And I know that there are actually several groups that are for young people of that age group, high school and college, and even younger than high school, in the Charlotte area now. We met with one of the organizers not too long ago, and he was trying to explain to us the 4 or 5 different organizations catering to that demographic, to young people who are interested in working on and advocating for action on climate change. So in fact, they are having events today and tomorrow and yesterday. They're having a lot of events this week as well. So broadly, there's the Sunrise Movement, and all of them, I think, there's a number within that umbrella. I can't speak to all the names of them, but certainly the Sunrise Movement has a chapter here in Charlotte, and maybe there's someone else on the call who can speak to that in more detail.
Awesome. We've got another question from Sean. He says, any concern that COVID will divert attention or resources away from smart growth initiatives over the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that in some ways it could. I think in other ways it could have a positive effect. I think one of the things we're seeing, is there's been a movement in some cities to do things that, advocates like us have been advocating for in those cities for years, which are really sort of, the types of urban planning changes, like devoting more public space to people to walk and to bike and to recreate. So, there's been, many cities, including Denver and Oakland, who have closed streets to cars to make it safer and easier for people to bike and walk while maintaining social distance. And so I think in that sense, you know, some of the, which those are of course things we've been advocating for here over the years. I think in that sense, it could be a good thing. In fact, I saw Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eisel posted a picture of a really, you know, narrow, overgrown sidewalk with a utility pole growing, you know, not growing, in the middle of it. And she actually made a comment to the effect of, you know, we're all thinking a lot more now about the need for you know, better public space for walking and biking as a means towards greater mobility and health. So here's an example of the type of sidewalk we shouldn't build, or something to that effect. She just shared that today on Facebook. So that, you know, I'm sort of an eternal optimist, but that gives me hope that there is awareness, I think, among a lot of people that some of the things we've been advocating for are really important, that maybe weren't as obvious before. But I think, you know, only time will tell. And obviously there's a lot of competition for limited resources, and a lot of resources are going to COVID, as they should right now. But I think the best thing we can hope for, of course, is that that this passes, you know, quickly or as soon as possible, so we can, you know, have, you know, free up resources for other important, you know, long-term needs, you know, such as smart growth and climate change and many other things.
Great. What other questions do we have? I've got one from Eric. He says, what are some of your biggest highlights or accomplishments from the last 10 years at Sustain Charlotte?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I think, you know, one thing that comes to mind is, you know, speaking of parks, you know, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2018, you know, there was a concern that many people had that we had not funded and began building many of the park projects that voters had approved funding for 10 years previously in the 2008 election. Only 13 or 12 or 13 projects of 25 or 26 park and rec projects that the funding had been approved for in 2008 had actually been built 10 years later, and they were all supposed to be built within 10 years. And that was, you know, largely due to the recession that really dampened our economy then. So, but we advocated with many others to ensure there was funding put into the county's capital budget to build those remaining, you know, dozen or so projects that were overdue, and that voters had said they wanted to have their funding, their tax dollars go towards. So, you know, we mounted a public, you know, petition and campaign, and were successful in securing, I forget how many million, I want to say somewhere around 50 or 60 million for parks, those parks to be completed over the next 5 years, so 2018 to 2023. So that's one that comes to mind. I think, you know, on the bicycle and pedestrian front, you know, we just had a big one this year where we first inspired and then supported the Plaza Midwood neighborhood to you know, to ask the city to convert the portion of the plaza that runs from Central Avenue to Parkwood from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane road with protected bike lanes on both sides, and more safe crossings for pedestrians. And after 4 years of sustained advocacy and planning in partnership with CDOT, that project was put on the ground in February or so, and we were able to do a big celebration for that in April. So that was a big one. These transportation projects usually take, you know, many years. They don't happen overnight. So those are exciting, and those are just a couple that come to mind.
Great. Anyone have one last question they want to share? If not, I have one more. Shannon, I'm curious where you see the most work still needs to be done. Like, of the main goals in that 2030 plan, is there one that seems like there's the most the most need there of those 10 or so categories in that plan?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that so many things are interrelated. One of the things we try to really highlight is that a lot of the challenges we face in our community from an environmental and an economic and an equity perspective are really rooted in in how we develop the city, how we build this city, the built environment. It's not something that's always, I think, obvious to people. But one thing I've learned over the 10 years is just how consequential those development decisions are. The segregation we have as a city by race and income is a result of policies and decisions that went into the built environment itself. Where we who we house and what we house them in, and where things are located. Those are all decisions that people made that led to our segregated city. And how we get around, the reliance on cars is a direct result of how we laid out our city and where we built things, and the rules that guide development. Our impact on the climate is largely driven by the fact we drive so much. That's a big, at the local level, that's our biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the reason we drive so much isn't so much because we all love to drive, it's what our city was designed for. So, I think, what we really need to focus on, and the good news is that I think, we're focusing more on this than we have in probably at least 50 years, is more compact, mixed use, walkable development. That's very much the national trend right now in cities across the country. People are rediscovering how nice it is to be able to walk and bike or ride transit to places and not have to spend hours every day in their car. And so I think that's why we're focused there. We're focused there because we believe that's the greatest need, and that it has the most consequences for our quality of life and all the things that most people care about.
That's great. Ron, it looks like you've got your hand raised. Go for it.
If everyone has seen some of the media stories, the impact that the pandemic has had on air quality. There was a lot on CBS this morning with pictures from other cities around the world, India. There was a segment on Los Angeles about how clear the air is and how there is not this fog and grayness as a result of the fact that people are not out driving their cars. And some speculation about whether or not that is going to cause people to think a little bit more, about air quality and the air that they're breathing, and what might mean for the future. So I don't know if anybody else saw those stories. I was really pleased to see the coverage that we had, at least on CBS this morning.
Yeah, the Observer actually did an article. The editorial board did an article yesterday about the impact on air quality here in Charlotte, which was nice. There's not a lot of data at this point, but the data they shared does show an improvement in our local air quality for this time of year compared to at least last year, which isn't a very robust set of data. But I think that certainly, as you said, anecdotally, and there's been data shared from other cities, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if your main source of air pollution is tailpipe emissions, which is our main source of air pollution, and there's less tailpipes, air will improve. And so yeah, I think I was just telling someone, obviously people are going to continue to drive largely in this city, largely because, as I mentioned earlier, that's it's part of our culture, but it's also it's embedded in our city's design. And until we really reallocate road space for safer walking and biking, and make the investments that we need to make in providing a safe and convenient and reliable transit system, most people are going to go back to driving. But I think it's really important that most people, they don't necessarily prefer to drive. They're doing what they have to do to get where they need to go, and that's the mode available. But I do think I hope it will help us see that when we do give people an opportunity to not drive, we do have positive benefits. You know, we could only talk before really about, you know, it was an abstract idea. Well, if we could help people get out of their cars, air quality will improve. You know, it was sort of a, you know, trust us, this would happen. And now it's, you know, we don't have to ask people to trust us. We can see that that's what happens. So I hope that the fact that there's evidence now that less driving leads to cleaner air will at least be meaningful for some people, particularly policymakers who have the ability to change those things I've talked about that we need to change.
Great. I just added in the chat, Charlotte Agenda just did an article on the environmental effects of COVID-19 that Shannon was quoted in, and they did a really great job with it if you guys want to check that out. Great. We've got one last question to end us on a little bit of a positive note. Mary Katherine asks, in the midst of the climate crisis and the U.S. departure from the Paris Climate Accord, what gives you hope?
Well, I think that I think that there is more concern and advocacy for action on climate change in the past, 12 to 18 months than I've ever seen. And this is an issue I've been working on in some way for, almost 20 years. I think the youth movement, led by Greta or inspired by Greta, has really changed public opinion. They have really, stood up in a big way, and they've gotten attention on this issue in a way that just wasn't there, at least certainly I'm talking about in the US, but also globally prior to that. I think, the devastation in North Carolina due to the extreme rainfall brought on by the hurricane, I guess it was maybe the year before last now, year and a half ago, also woke a lot of North Carolinians up to this is a problem that's here. It's not a future problem. So I've just seen a tremendous shift in the number of people locally, nationally, globally talking about the need to act on climate change who weren't talking about it before. So I would say that's what gives me hope on that issue.
Great. Well, thanks for your questions, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, so at this point, I'm going to turn this over to actually I think our newest employee, Mary Katherine Freeman, who's our development associate, to talk to you a little bit about how you can support Sustain Charlotte today if you haven't already. Is Mary Katherine still on mute, maybe?
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. Hey, everybody. I am Mary Katherine. And like Shannon said, I am the newest employee and team member to the Sustain Charlotte family. And as a development associate, I really get to do something that I think is really special, which is cultivate relationships with people that are generous enough to give to us. And I just wanted to touch on this really quickly because I think right now asking people for money is never necessarily a comfortable or fun thing, but I think especially now when budgets are tight and times are tough, it can be really hard and difficult to make that ask. And so I think right now I want to preface this by saying, if you're able, like we would love to invite you to stack hands with us on our mission to make Charlotte a more livable, accessible, united city for all people. If that's not something you're capable of doing, there's so many other ways that you can get involved and support Sustain Charlotte's work. But right now, I am going to touch a little bit about the giving aspect. Right now, if you have not given today, I just wanted to highlight this really quickly and say, if you give today, if you give to our Earth Day campaign by going on to sustaincharlotte.org /membership, or /membership, you will find all of our different membership options. This is really the main thing that we encourage people who are interested in supporting us financially to do. And if you give in one of these 3 different options, if you give $10 a month as a brand new donor you've never given before, and if you make sign up to be a reoccurring donor by $10 a month, if you're currently giving to us and sharing your generous donations with us, if you increase your donation by $10, or if you give a one-time gift of $120, we would love to thank you by gifting you with this cool Sustain Charlotte reusable utensil and straw pack, which will be perfect for whether you are social distancing by eating in your backyard, having picnic, or if you are on the go. And that way you don't have to use plastic utensils. So that is something that we're really excited about, really excited to gift you all with. And I think for me, when it comes to Earth Day and just looking at, I think there has never been, despite, Shannon encapsulated it so perfectly, the health of our world directly impacts our health. And I think that in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, there's never been a better time to make an investment in future generations. Whether or not you ever see the fruit of that, whether or not you ever meet these future generations, they're going to reap the benefits of the work that you've done for sustainability for years and years and years to come. So just wanted to let you guys know about our giving opportunities. If you have further questions about donations or how to give or how to partner with us on our financial level, or maybe trying to get your company to partner, we have company partnerships also available. Please feel free to email me. You can find my email on our website, or you can email me at maryc.freeman@sustainedcharlotte.org. And I can also put that in the chat. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we're very grateful for you all. So stay safe and stay healthy. And I'm now going to turn it over to our program director, Meg, and she is going to kind of walk us through some of the things that are coming up for Sustain Charlotte. So I'm going to turn it over to Meg and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thanks so much, Mary Katherine. And just on a personal note, I've been at Sustain Charlotte for almost 6.5 years now, which is hard for me to believe sometimes. And that's over half of the life of Sustain Charlotte. And it's been so inspiring to see so many of you support us in different ways, whether it's giving or volunteering or serving on our board or helping to spread the word about what we do. So we really appreciate you for what you do and want to thank you for that. We were hoping to get together today on Earth Day to celebrate our Charlotte Sustainability Awards. Unfortunately, a little thing called the coronavirus put a crimp in those plans, but we don't cancel parties, we reschedule them. So please mark your calendar for September 9th. It should be beautiful fall weather by then. And we're going to hold these Charlotte Sustainability Awards from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Extravaganza Depot. One thing that you can do now is to check out the more than 50 amazing nominees who have been nominated for our awards. And they're all doing amazing work, both as individuals and organizations. So please check them out and just start to get excited about coming to that celebration with us on September 9th. We know that the work of our volunteers doesn't stop just because we can't do our work in person. We actually have a lot of ways that people can help us out as volunteers right from their own homes. As an advocacy organization, we don't necessarily have to always be out in the community, although we'd love to do that. There are certainly ways that you can have an impact from home. So we're going to be hosting our first ever virtual volunteer social next week, Thursday, April 30th at noon. You can register for that at sustaincharlotte.org. And whether you volunteered with us for a long time or you're just interested in checking it out and learning more, this is a great chance to come and just learn a little bit more about the work that Sustain Charlotte does, how our volunteers support us, and then we'll be giving you some really tangible ways that you can help us out as a volunteer if that's something that you feel called to do. We've been hosting a series of virtual workshops, and our next one is going to be in 2 weeks, Wednesday, May 6th at noon. You can register at sustaincharlotte.org/events. And the topic is healthy air, healthy lungs during ozone season. So in North Carolina, ozone season runs from March through October. And these are the months when ground level ozone is at its highest concentration. And it's especially, we're all considering how to keep ourselves healthy. It's really important that we understand why air quality matters and how to interpret those air quality alerts so that we can protect our family and ourselves during ozone season. So we'll be having 2 expert guest speakers with us, Megan Green from Mecklenburg County Air Quality, helping us interpret the air quality alerts. And we'll have Courtney Schultz from the Charlotte Area Transit System, who will talk about the importance of public transit in keeping our air clean. And she'll show you a simple way that you can help our county and our city track how many miles are being saved from driving as people are telecommuting and driving less. So please join us for that event. We also know that having space, safe space to walk and ride a bicycle and having a really strong, robust public transit system is really critical, especially in this time of social distancing. We know that the city is reevaluating its budget, and there will likely be some changes from the earlier versions of the budget, but we think it's really important that the city prioritizes space for people to travel if they don't have a car or if they choose not to drive. We have really narrow sidewalks in Charlotte. We don't have enough places to safely ride a bicycle. And a lot of that really needs to change so that we can have that minimum 6-foot distance from each other and be able to get around with safety and dignity in every part of Charlotte, whether it's uptown, north, south, east, west Charlotte. These are basic needs that everybody has. So we encourage you to go to sustaincharlotte.org/action. We have a pretty detailed petition to the Charlotte City Council asking them to allocate $50 million over the next 2 years for cyclist and pedestrian safety projects. We would really, really love your support. We've had a harder time than we would have if we could have been out in the community getting signatures. So one of the most impactful things that you could do is to sign that statement of support and share it with your network. And just, if you believe what you see there, if you think that these are things that are important for our community, please help us by just sharing it, whether it's on your Facebook page or your social media or sharing it by email. Our city gets better when people speak up and say that they want the city to invest in ways to make the city better for everyone. We also would love for you to follow us on social media. Sarah Ann does a great job with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So we have all of our social media handles on there. And I'm guessing all of you are already signed up for our newsletter, but if you happen not to be, or if you know somebody who would love a great sustainability newsletter, you can encourage them to go over to sustaincharlotte.org and sign up for that newsletter.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We are just so grateful for all of your support through such an unusual time, and we really look forward to whenever the day is that we can all gather together in person. So go enjoy the sunshine, and please do tag us if you share anything on social about Earth Day with the hashtag #ISustainCLT. So thank you guys so much. Happy Earth Day, and we will see you guys soon.